What happens when a tech titan trades his corner office for a cubicle, only to face the sting of his own company's judgment? This is the story of a man who risked everything to rediscover what leadership truly means, a tale of humility, courage, and the power of human connection that will leave you inspired and questioning what it takes to lead. In the heart of New York City, where skyscrapers pierce the clouds and ambition pulse through the streets, Skyline Solutions stood as a beacon of innovation. Its sleek glass headquarters buzzed with the hum of servers, the clatter of keyboards, and the dreams of young coders chasing the next big breakthrough. But beneath the polished surface of this multi-million-dollar tech empire, a quiet experiment was about to unfold, one that would change lives in ways no one could have imagined. At the center of this story was Ethan Caldwell, a 45-year-old visionary who had built Skyline Solutions from a dorm room dream into a powerhouse. With dark hair flecked with silver and sharp green eyes that missed nothing, Ethan was a leader who commanded respect, not through fear, but through a relentless drive for excellence. Yet, despite his success, Ethan carried a weight few knew about. Years ago, early in his career, he'd made a mistake that haunted him. He'd fired a talented engineer, Sarah Monroe, based on cold metrics, unaware of the personal struggles. She faced a sick child, a crumbling marriage. Her tearful exit had stayed with him, a reminder that numbers didn't tell the whole story. That regret fueled Ethan's decision to do something radical, to step out of his ivory tower and into the trenches of his own company. Ethan's plan was simple but daring. He would disguise himself as Daniel Reed, a mid-level programmer, and work among his employees to understand their challenges, their fears, their dreams. He traded his tailored suits for a hoodie and jeans, donned a pair of glasses to soften his recognizable features, and let his beard grow just enough to blur the lines of his identity. His assistant, Claire, thought he was crazy. "You're the CEO, Ethan," she'd protested, her arms crossed in their Manhattan office. "What if they find out? You're risking everything." Ethan had smiled, his eyes steady. "If I don't know what my people go through, I'm not leading. I'm just sitting in a chair." On a crisp September morning, Daniel Reed walked into Skyline Solutions, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his heart pounding with a mix of nerves and excitement. The open-plan office was a hive of activity. Developers hunched over laptops, whiteboards scrawled with algorithms, coffee cups littering every desk. Daniel was assigned a small cubicle near the back, its walls bare except for a faded sticky note with a smiley face. His job was to debug code, assist with projects, and blend in a task easier said than done for a man used to boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. The team he joined was led by Thomas Bennett, a manager in his late 30s, with a calm demeanor and a knack for keeping the chaos in check. Thomas had a warm smile, but his eyes carried the strain of balancing deadlines with the demands of the board. He welcomed Daniel with a firm handshake, his voice steady but kind. "Glad to have you, Daniel. We're in crunch time for the Nexus project, so dive in and don't be afraid to ask questions." Daniel nodded, settling into his role, but he couldn't help noticing the undercurrents in the room. Developers whispered about looming deadlines, and a few shot wary glances at Thomas, as if bracing for bad news. As days turned into weeks, Daniel threw himself into the work. He fixed bugs in the Nexus app, a new platform for streamlining client data, and stayed late to help a struggling colleague, Lisa, a sharp-witted programmer with a tendency to snap under pressure. "You're not half bad for a newbie," she'd said grudgingly after he spotted an error she'd missed. Daniel smiled, keeping his responses short to avoid drawing attention. But he was watching, listening, learning. He saw the late nights that left coders bleary-eyed, the frustration when servers crashed, the quiet pride when a feature worked perfectly. He also saw the fear of missing deadlines, of falling short, of being the one cut when the annual performance reviews rolled around. Ethan's disguise wasn't perfect. He had to bite his tongue during meetings when Thomas discussed strategies. He'd shaped as CEO, resisting the urge to correct or suggest. He noticed how some employees, like Lisa, pushed themselves to exhaustion, while others coasted, dodging responsibility. He also saw Thomas's efforts to keep morale high organizing Pizza Fridays and quick stand-up meetings to celebrate small wins. But the pressure from above, the board's demand for results, was palpable, and it trickled down, creating a tension that Daniel felt in every keystroke dot. To test the team's dynamics, Daniel made a calculated move. On a critical section of the Nexus code, he intentionally left a small bug, a delay in data processing that wouldn't tank the project but would cause frustration. He wanted to see how the team would react, how Thomas would handle the setback. The response was swift. Lisa, reviewing the code, caught the error and confronted him in the break room, her voice sharp. "What's your deal, Daniel? This could have cost us days." Daniel apologized, feigning inexperience, but he noted her quick catch and the team's irritation. Thomas, meanwhile, called a meeting to address the delay, his tone firm but fair. "We all make mistakes," he said, "but we fix them together." Daniel nodded, his respect for Thomas growing, but he knew the real test was coming. The annual performance review was approaching, a looming shadow that hung over the office. Whispers of layoffs circulated, and Daniel felt the weight of his experiment. As Ethan, he'd approved the review process, but as Daniel, he was about to face it from the other side. He wondered, would his intentional misstep put him in the crosshairs? Would Thomas see his contributions or only his errors? The uncertainty was thrilling, but it also stirred a quiet fear. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't in control. And that vulnerability was exactly what he'd come to understand. Outside, the New York skyline glittered under a harvest moon, its lights a reminder of the city's relentless drive. Daniel left the office, his hoodie pulled up against the chill, and glanced back at Skyline Solutions' glowing logo. He'd come to learn what his employees faced, but he hadn't expected to feel so much. The camaraderie, the pressure, the quiet hope that kept them going. As he walked through the bustling streets, he knew he was on the cusp of something bigger than himself. The performance review was days away, and with it, a moment that would change everything, not just for him, but for Skyline Solutions. The glass walls of Skyline Solutions' New York headquarters reflected the frenetic pulse of the city, but inside, a different kind of energy simmered. A mix of ambition, exhaustion, and unspoken fear. It was early October, and the Nexus project, a flagship app meant to revolutionize client data management, was nearing a critical deadline. The open plan office buzzed with the clatter of keyboards and the low hum of urgent conversations. Daniel Reed, the unassuming programmer who was secretly Ethan Caldwell, CEO of the company, sat at his cramped cubicle, his fingers dancing over the keyboard as he debugged code. His hoodie and glasses masked the man who'd built this empire, but they couldn't hide the tension that gripped the room. The annual performance review loomed like a storm cloud, and Daniel's calculated gamble, a deliberate bug in the Nexus code, was about to set off a chain of events that would test everyone, including himself. Daniel had been at Skyline Solutions for over a month, blending into the team as a quiet but helpful coder. He'd earned a few nods of respect for catching errors in late-night coding sessions, but his intentional misstep in the Nexus project had stirred unease. The bug, a subtle delay in data processing, had caused a ripple effect. Reports were late, clients were frustrated, and the team was scrambling. Lisa, a sharp-witted programmer with dark circles under her eyes, was the first to call him out. "Daniel, that bug cost us a day," she said in the break room, her voice sharp as she poured coffee. "You're new, but you've got to step it up." Daniel nodded, feigning embarrassment. My bad, Lisa. I'll double-check next time. Inside, Ethan noted her quick catch and her stress signs of a team stretched thin under pressure. The office was a pressure cooker. Developers worked late, their screens glowing long after the city's skyline lit up. Thomas Bennett, the team's manager, tried to keep spirits high, dropping by desks with encouraging words or ordering takeout during crunch times. At 38, Thomas was a steady presence, his warm brown eyes and easy smile a contrast to the board's relentless demands for results. But even he couldn't hide the strain. During his stand-up meeting, he addressed the Nexus delay, his voice calm but firm. We're behind, but we're a team. Let's fix this together. Daniel watched as heads nodded, but he also saw the fear in their eyes, fear of being the one blamed if the project failed. Daniel's experiment wasn't just about testing the team's technical skills. It was about understanding their dynamics under stress. As Ethan, he'd seen reports of high turnover at Skyline Solutions, and he suspected the pressure from above was eroding trust. By introducing the bug, he wanted to see who would step up, who would crack, and how Thomas would lead. But the move came at a cost. Lisa and a few others began to distance themselves, their conversations growing curt. New guy slipping, one coder muttered during a coffee run, unaware Daniel was nearby. The isolation stung more than Ethan expected, reminding him of his mother's stories about being overlooked in her own job years ago. As the performance review approached, the office buzzed with nervous energy. Whispers of layoffs circulated, fueled by rumors that the board was pushing for cost-cutting. Daniel overheard snippets in the break room. They're looking at metrics, one developer said, glancing at a spreadsheet. Missed deadlines. Don't look good. Daniel kept his head down, but his heart raced. His bug had been fixed, but the delay had left a mark, and he knew his performance as Daniel Reed was under scrutiny. He wondered if his experiment had gone too far, if he'd misjudged the team's response or Thomas's judgment. The review day arrived, a chilly November morning that matched the mood in the conference room. Glass walls framed a view of Manhattan's skyline, but inside, the air was heavy with anticipation. Employees filed in, their laptops closed, their faces tight. Thomas stood at the front, his tie slightly loosened, his expression a mix of resolve and regret. Today's tough, he began, his voice carrying a warmth that softened the edge of his words. We've reviewed everyone's contributions, code quality, deadlines, teamwork. We've made some hard calls to keep Skyline strong. A hush fell, the kind that comes when everyone knows what's coming, but hopes it won't. Thomas's eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on Daniel before moving on. We're letting one person go, he said, his voice steady but heavy. Their work hasn't met our standards, and we can't afford to carry that weight. He paused, the silence deafening. Daniel Reed. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Lisa's eyes widened, and a junior coder, Jake, whispered, "No way." Daniel froze, his heart pounding, though he'd half expected this. His bug, his quiet demeanor, his newbie status, it had added up. Thomas continued, explaining that Daniel's errors, particularly the Nexus delay, had impacted the team's performance. It's not personal, Thomas said, his tone softer. Now, it's about what's best for the company. The room spun for a moment, but Ethan kept his composure. As Daniel, he rose from his chair, his hand steady despite the storm inside. Colleagues watched, some with pity, others with relief it wasn't them. Lisa looked down, her earlier frustration replaced by unease. Daniel walked to the front, his backpack slung over one shoulder, and extended a hand to Thomas. "Thank you for the opportunity," he said, his voice calm, almost serene. Thomas shook his hand, his brow furrowed, as if sensing something was off. With a final nod, Daniel walked out, the glass doors closing behind him, leaving a room full of questions. Outside, the New York wind bit at Ethan's face as he stepped onto the sidewalk. He pulled up his hoodie, blending into the city's rush, but his mind was racing. Being fired stung, even if it was part of his plan. He'd wanted to feel what his employees felt, and now he did. The shock, the humiliation, the uncertainty. But he also felt a strange clarity. The team's reaction, Thomas's decision, the whispers of layoffs, it all pointed to a deeper issue. Skyline Solutions was thriving on paper, but its heart was fraying. Ethan knew this wasn't the end. It was a beginning, a chance to rebuild something better. As he walked through Central Park, the city's chaos fading into the rustle of leaves, Ethan reflected on his next move. He needed to talk to Thomas, to reveal his identity, but not yet. He wanted to understand the aftermath, to see how the team would react to Daniel's exit. Rumors were already spreading. He'd heard Jake muttering about how Daniel didn't even fight back. Ethan smiled to himself, a spark of determination igniting. He'd let the storm settle, but when the time came, he'd show Skyline Solutions what leadership really meant. The skyline loomed ahead, a reminder of the empire he'd built and the one he was about to reshape. The New York skyline shimmered under a cold November moon, its lights a silent witness to the city's relentless ambition. For Ethan Caldwell, the CEO of Skyline Solutions, those lights had once symbolized triumph, a testament to the empire he'd built from a dorm room dream. But now, as he sat in his Manhattan apartment, the glow felt distant, almost mocking. Just days ago, he'd walked out of his own company as Daniel Reed, a mid-level programmer fired for failing to meet expectations. The sting of that moment lingered, not because his job was at stake, but because it had shown him a truth he couldn't ignore. His company was faltering, not in profits, but in its soul. As Ethan stared out his floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of untouched whiskey in hand, he knew it was time to act, to turn his experiment into a catalyst for change. The firing had been a shock, even if Ethan had half expected it. His intentional bug and Nexus project, a calculated test in his team's dynamics, had backfired, marking him as the weak link in a high-pressure environment. Walking out of Skyline Solutions, his hoodie pulled up against the chill, he'd felt the weight of every glance. Lisa's unease, Jake's surprise, Thomas Bennett's quiet regret. As Daniel Reed, he'd shaken Thomas's hand, thanking him for the opportunity. But as Ethan, he'd seen the cracks in his company's culture. The whispers of layoffs, the fear-driven scramble to meet deadlines, the way his team had turned on him, it all pointed to a deeper problem. Skyline Solutions was a machine running on metrics, not people, and Ethan had to fix it. In the days that followed, Ethan kept his distance, letting the dust settle. He worked from his apartment, reviewing reports as CEO, but resisting the urge to intervene. He wanted to understand the aftermath of Daniel's exit, to see how the team would react. Rumors reached him through Claire, his assistant, who'd reluctantly become his eyes and ears. "They're talking about Daniel," she said over coffee at a quiet cafe. "Some think he was lazy. Others say he didn't deserve it. Lisa feels bad. She thinks she was too hard on him." Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. And Thomas?" he asked. Claire sighed. "He's beating himself up. Thinks he missed something about Daniel." Ethan's jaw tightened. Thomas's guilt was a sign of his integrity, but it also meant he was carrying a burden Ethan needed to lift. Ethan's time as Daniel had changed him. He'd felt the grind of endless code reviews, the pressure of deadlines, the sting of being overlooked. He remembered his mother's stories of her own low-wage job, where managers saw numbers, not people. That memory, coupled with his past mistake of firing Sarah Monroe without understanding her struggles, drove him now. Being fired as Daniel wasn't a failure, it was a revelation. It showed him how fear could fracture a team, how metrics could blind a leader. But it also showed him hope. Lisa's quick catch of his bug, Jake's quiet defense, Thomas's fairness. There was something worth saving at Skyline Solutions, and Ethan was ready to fight for it. He decided it was time to reveal himself, but only to Thomas for now. Ethan needed an ally to lay the groundwork for change before going public. He texted Thomas, asking to meet at a small coffee shop near Central Park, signing the message as Ethan Caldwell. When Thomas arrived, his tie loosened after a long day. He looked puzzled. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, shaking Ethan's hand. "I wasn't expecting you. Is this about the Nexus project?" Ethan smiled, gesturing to a seat. "It's about something bigger, Thomas. Sit down." Over steaming mugs of coffee, Ethan told the truth. "I'm Daniel Reed," he said, his voice steady but low. Thomas's eyes widened, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and embarrassment. "You're what?" he stammered, setting his mug down hard. Ethan explained his experiment, the disguise, the bug, the decision to let himself be judged as an employee. "I needed to see what my people go through," he said. "Not from reports, but from their level. I needed to feel it." Thomas ran, a hand through his hair, his voice tight. "Why didn't you tell me? I fired you. I thought I was doing the right thing." "You did," Ethan said, leaning forward. "You made a call based on what you knew. That's leadership, but it also showed me what's broken. Our team's scared, Thomas. They're chasing numbers, not ideas. We're losing what made Skyline special." Thomas looked down, his guilt palpable. "I should have seen it," he said quietly. "I pushed too hard, didn't I? And Daniel, I didn't give you a chance to explain." Ethan shook his head. "You did what the system asked. That's why we're changing the system." Ethan outlined his vision, a new initiative called Empathy First, focused on transparency, respect, and collaboration. He wanted Thomas's help to roll it out, starting with small changes, open feedback sessions, fair evaluations, rewards for teamwork. "But I'm not announcing it yet," Ethan said. "I want to do it at the holiday party, in front of everyone. Let's keep my identity as Daniel quiet until then." Thomas nodded, still processing. "Why the secrecy?" he asked. Ethan smiled faintly. "Because I want them to trust the change, not just the CEO. I want them to believe in us." As they parted, Thomas's expression was a mix of awe and resolve. "I'm in," he said, "but this is a lot." Ethan clapped him on the shoulder. "We'll do it together." Walking back to his apartment, Ethan felt a weight lift. Thomas's reaction, shock, guilt, then commitment gave him hope. But he also knew the harder part was coming. Rumors about Daniel's firing were spreading, and Claire had mentioned whispers of discontent. Lisa and others were questioning why Daniel hadn't fought back, and some suspected he'd been a plant sent to spy on them. The mistrust was a hurdle Ethan hadn't anticipated, and it made his next steps critical. Back in his apartment, Ethan opened his laptop, pulling up Skyline's latest metrics. The Nexus project was back on track, but turnover was still high, and employee surveys showed declining morale. He thought of Lisa's frustration, Jake's loyalty, Thomas's struggle to balance leadership with pressure from above, his firing. As Daniel had exposed these truths, but it had also cost him something: his anonymity, his ease among the team. He wondered if he could rebuild their trust, not as a CEO, but as a leader who'd walked in their shoes. Outside, the city hummed, its lights a reminder of the stakes. Skyline Solutions wasn't just a company. It was a community Ethan had built, and he'd nearly lost sight of that. The holiday party was weeks away, and with it, a chance to rewrite the story, not just for himself, but for everyone at Skyline. As he closed his laptop, Ethan felt a spark of determination. He'd been fired as Daniel Reed, but as Ethan Caldwell, he was ready to lead again, not from above, but alongside his team. The winter chill settled over New York City, wrapping Skyline Solutions' glass headquarters in a frosty glow. Inside, the open-plan office hummed with the familiar rhythm of keyboards and murmured code reviews, but an undercurrent of unease rippled through the team. Ethan Caldwell, the CEO, who had walked among them as Daniel Reed, was no longer just a shadow in the cubicles. He'd revealed his identity to Thomas Bennett, his trusted manager, and together they were laying the groundwork for a transformation that could redefine the company. But change was never easy, and as Ethan worked to introduce his empathy-first initiative, he faced resistance from skeptical employees, a wary board, and the lingering echoes of his own firing. With the holiday party weeks away a stage for his public reveal, Ethan knew the stakes were higher than ever. Ethan's apartment, perched high above Manhattan, had become a war room of sorts. Late at night, under the glow of his laptop, he drafted plans for Empathy First, open feedback forms, revised performance metrics that valued collaboration over competition, and training sessions on workplace respect. His goal was to rebuild Skyline Solutions' culture, to make it a place where people thrived, not just survived. But the memory of his firing as Daniel Reed weighed on him. He'd felt the sting of being judged by numbers, the isolation of being cast aside. That experience, coupled with his past mistake of firing Sarah Monroe without understanding her struggles, fueled his resolve. He wasn't just fixing a company. He was honoring a promise to himself, to his mother, to every employee who'd ever felt unseen. Thomas was his ally, but even he was hesitant. Over coffee at their usual spot near Central Park, Thomas leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "This empathy-first idea, it's bold, Ethan, but the board's not going to like it," he said, stirring his latte. "They want results, not feelings, and the team. They're already on edge after Daniel's firing." Ethan nodded, his green eyes steady. "I know it's a hard sell. That's why we start small feedback sessions, team-building exercises. Show them it works, not just tell them." Thomas sighed, running a hand through his hair. "And the board? They're asking why you've been so quiet lately. They don't know you were Daniel." Ethan's jaw tightened. "They will. At the holiday party. Until then, we keep this between us." Back at Skyline Solutions, the office was a maze of unspoken tensions. The Nexus project had launched successfully, easing some pressure, but Daniel's firing had left a mark. Rumors swirled. Some said he'd been a spy for management, others that he'd quit in disgrace. Lisa, the programmer who'd called Daniel out for his bug, was quieter now, her sharp edge dulled by guilt. "I didn't think he'd get canned," she admitted to Jake, a junior coder, during a lunch break. Jake shrugged, his loyalty to Daniel lingering. "He wasn't that bad. Helped me with my code once." The whispers reached Ethan through Claire, his assistant, who warned him of growing mistrust. "They're saying management's playing games," she said, her tone sharp. "You need to clear this up." Ethan and Thomas began rolling out the first steps of Empathy First, discreetly. Thomas organized a feedback session, asking employees to share ideas anonymously. The suggestion box filled with notes, requests for flexible hours, complaints about micromanaging, even praise for Thomas's Pizza Fridays. Ethan, working from his CEO office but staying out of the spotlight, read each one, his heart heavy with the weight of their honesty. He saw potential in the team, Lisa's drive, Jake's loyalty, but also fear, a legacy of the metrics-driven culture he'd unwittingly fostered. The resistance came fast. During a team meeting to discuss the feedback, Lisa stood up, her arms crossed. "What's the point of this?" she asked, her voice edged with skepticism. "We suggest stuff, but nothing changes. And what's with Daniel getting fired?" Was Some kind of test? The room murmured in agreement, eyes darting to Thomas. Ethan, attending as CEO, but not yet revealing his Daniel identity, felt the tension like a physical weight. Thomas glanced at him, then addressed the room. "Where?" "Listening," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Daniel's departure was a tough call, but we're focused on moving forward. Give us a chance to prove it." Lisa sat down, unconvinced, and Ethan knew he'd have to work harder to win her trust. The board was another battle. In a sleek conference room, Ethan faced a grilling from the directors, led by Margaret Voss, a no-nonsense executive with a sharp tongue. "You've been absent, Ethan," she said, her eyes narrowing. "The Nexus launch went well, but we're hearing rumors of unrest." "What's going on?" Ethan kept his tone even, revealing just enough. "I'm working on a new initiative to boost morale and retention. It's called Empathy First, and it'll make us stronger." Margaret scoffed. "Empathy doesn't pay dividends." Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady. "It does when it keeps our best people. Give me until the new year to show results." The board reluctantly agreed, but Ethan knew he was on borrowed time. Thomas, meanwhile, was evolving. The guilt of firing Daniel had shaken him, forcing him to question his own leadership. He started small, checking in with employees like Lisa, asking about their challenges rather than their output. During a late-night coding session, he brought coffee to the team, staying to chat about their ideas. "I've been too focused on numbers," he admitted to Ethan over a call. "I didn't see what Daniel you were doing for the team." Ethan smiled, hearing the change in Thomas's voice. "You're seeing it now. That's what matters." The holiday party loomed, a glittering event planned at a downtown hotel. Ethan saw it as the perfect stage to reveal his identity and launch Empathy First publicly. He and Thomas worked tirelessly, drafting his speech and planning team-building activities to follow. But the mistrust among employees was a growing hurdle. Lisa and a few others had started a group chat, speculating that Daniel had been a corporate mole. When Claire tipped Ethan off, he felt a pang of regret. His experiment had built a wall between him and his team, one he'd have to tear down with honesty. One evening, as snow dusted the city, Ethan walked through Central Park, his breath visible in the cold air. He thought of his mother who'd worked thankless jobs to raise him, and of Sarah Monroe, whose firing had taught him the cost of blindness. Daniel's firing had been a mirror, showing him the flaws in his company and in himself. He was ready to face his team, not as a CEO in a suit, but as a man who'd failed, learned, and come back stronger. The holiday party was his chance to rebuild trust, but it would take more than words. It would take action, vulnerability, and a belief that Skyline Solutions could be more than a company. It could be a community. The New York winter nights sparkled with a festive glow, the city's skyscrapers adorned with holiday lights that mirrored the anticipation pulsing through Skyline Solutions. Inside the grand ballroom of the Manhattan Skyline Hotel, the company's holiday party was in full swing, a glittering affair of clinking glasses, upbeat music, and employees dressed in their finest. The glass walls of the venue reflected a sea of faces, some laughing, others cautious, united by a year of triumphs and tensions. For Ethan Caldwell, the CEO, who had walked among them as Daniel Reed, this was no ordinary celebration. Tonight, he would step out of his disguise, reveal the truth of his journey, and call his team to a new vision. As he adjusted his suit jacket, backstage, his heart pounded, not with doubt, but with the weight of a moment that could redefine Skyline Solutions. The party was a welcome break from the grind of deadlines and code. Developers mingled with designers, their usual hoodies replaced by dresses and blazers. A buffet overflowed with appetizers, and a jazz band played softly in the corner. Thomas Bennett, the team's manager, moved through the crowd, his warm smile easing the lingering unease from Daniel's firing weeks ago. Thomas had changed since learning Ethan was Daniel. His leadership now carried a quiet empathy, evident in the way he checked in with Lisa, the sharp-witted programmer, or joked with Jake, the junior coder. But the rumors about Daniel persisted, fueled by Lisa's group chat, where some speculated he'd been a corporate mole. The mistrust hung like a shadow, and Ethan knew tonight's speech would either dispel it or deepen the divide. Ethan had spent weeks preparing with Thomas, crafting a speech that would not only reveal his identity, but also launch Empathy First, the initiative to transform Skyline's culture. They'd planned follow-up actions, team-building workshops, transparent evaluations, bonuses for collaboration to show the team that change was real. But Ethan's biggest challenge was personal. He had to convince his employees, not his own CEO, but as a man who'd shared their struggles. The memory of his firing as Daniel read Lisa's frustration, Thomas's regret, the team's shock still stung, but it had also clarified his purpose. He thought of his mother, who'd endured thankless jobs, and Sarah Monroe, whose firing had taught him the cost of blindness. Tonight, he'd honor them by leading with his heart. As the band paused, Thomas took the stage, his tie loosened, a coruscant microphone in hand. "Good evening, everyone," he said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "This year's been tough, but we've done incredible things. The Nexus launch, new clients, and a team that keeps pushing. Tonight's about celebrating you." Applause rippled through the room, though some glances were wary. Thomas's eyes flickered to the wings, where Ethan waited. "We've got a special guest who wants to share something important. Please welcome Ethan Caldwell, our CEO." The crowd clapped politely as Ethan stepped into the spotlight, his tailored suit a stark contrast to Daniel's hoodie. His salt and pepper hair caught the light, and his green eyes scanned the room, finding Lisa's skeptical gaze, Jake's curious one, and Thomas's encouraging nod. He took a deep breath, the microphone cool in his hand. "Thank you, Thomas," he began, his voice steady but warm. "And thank you all for being here. Skyline Solutions is my life's work, but tonight I'm not here to talk about profits or projects. I'm here to tell you my story." The room grew quiet, curiosity replacing caution. Ethan paused, letting the moment settle. "A few months ago, I joined this team, not as your CEO, but as one of you. My name was Daniel Reed." A gasp swept through the crowd, followed by murmurs. Lisa's hand froze on her glass, her eyes wide. Jake whispered, "No way." Ethan raised a hand, his smile gentle. "I know it's a shock. I wore a hoodie, sat in a cubicle, and debugged code badly, according to some of you." Laughter broke the tension, though Lisa's face remained guarded. "I did it because I was losing sight of what matters," Ethan continued. "Years ago, I fired someone, a talented woman named Sarah Monroe, because I looked at numbers, not her life. That mistake haunted me. So I became Daniel to feel what you feel. The late nights, the pressure, the fear of falling short. And I learned something. I got fired." The crowd chuckled nervously, but Ethan's tone grew serious. "Thomas made the call because I let a bug slip in the Nexus project. It was my test, my mistake, and it showed me how fear drives us apart." Thomas shifted in his seat, his guilt resurfacing, but Ethan's eyes met his, offering reassurance. "That firing wasn't a failure," Ethan said. "It was a lesson. We've built a company that's strong on paper, but weak in trust. That ends tonight. I'm launching Empathy First, an initiative to make Skyline a place where you're valued, not just measured. We're starting with open feedback, fair evaluations, and rewards for teamwork. Because success without humanity is meaningless." The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Lisa's expression softened, her skepticism giving way to curiosity. Jake nodded, his loyalty to Daniel now making sense. Ethan's voice grew softer, more personal. Personal. I failed as Daniel because I didn't meet your standards. But I'm proud to stand here, not above you, but with you, as we build something greater. Will you join me? Applause erupted, tentative at first, then thunderous. Lisa hesitated, then clapped, her eyes glistening. Before Ethan could step down, Lisa stood, her voice cutting through the noise. "Mr. Caldwell, Ethan," she said, her tone raw. "I was hard on Daniel. I thought you were slacking, but you were helping us. I'm sorry." The room hushed, and Ethan smiled, his warmth genuine. "Lisa, you caught my bug. You pushed us to be better. That's what I want from all of you." Lisa sat, her face flushed but relieved, and the crowd's applause grew warmer. A sign of unity, taking root. Thomas joined Ethan on stage, his smile broad. "We've got work to do," he said, "but tonight, let's celebrate what we can become." The band struck up a lively tune, and the party resumed, the atmosphere lighter, as if a cloud had lifted. Employees approached Ethan, some shaking his hand, others sharing stories of their own struggles. Jake grinned, saying, "You were a decent coder for a CEO." Ethan laughed, feeling a connection he hadn't in years. As the night wound down, Ethan stood by the venue's glass walls, watching the city sparkle. Thomas joined him, a drink in hand. "That was something else," Thomas said. "They're with you, Ethan." Ethan nodded, his eyes distant. "It's a start, but we've got to live it every day." He thought of his mother, of Sarah, of the team now dancing and laughing. Skyline Solutions was on the cusp of something new, not just a company, but a community. The holiday party had been a turning point, but the real work building trust, proving empathy first, lay ahead. The New York skyline glowed with the promise of spring, its skyscrapers standing tall against a canvas of dawn. Months had passed since the holiday party where Ethan Caldwell, the CEO of Skyline Solutions, had shed his disguise as Daniel Reed and unveiled his vision for a new era. The glass headquarters of the company, once a place of cold metrics and quiet fears, now pulsed with a different energy, a warmth born of trust, collaboration, and a shared belief in something greater. Ethan stood on his office balcony, the city's hum a backdrop to his thoughts. The journey from cubicle to corner office, from firing to revelation, had changed him, his team, and Skyline Solutions itself. As he sipped his coffee, he knew the story wasn't over. It was a beginning, a legacy of kindness and courage that would ripple far beyond these walls. Skyline Solutions had transformed in the months since the party. The Empathy First initiative, launched with Ethan's heartfelt speech, was no longer just a plan, it was a way of life. Open feedback forums had become a weekly ritual, where employees like Lisa, the once skeptical programmer, shared ideas for streamlining code or improving work-life balance. Transparent evaluations replaced the old metrics-driven system, rewarding teamwork as much as individual output. Bonuses for collaboration sparked a wave of cross-department projects, with coders and designers working side by side, their laughter echoing through the office. The suggestion box Ethan had championed overflowed, its notes a testament to a team that felt heard. One read, "Thank you for caring," unsigned but powerful in its simplicity. The company's success reflected the change. The Nexus app, once a source of stress, had gained industry praise, and new clients flocked to Skyline Solutions, drawn by its reputation as a place of innovation and integrity. Turnover plummeted, and employee surveys showed morale at an all-time high. Ethan walked the office floor daily, no longer in a hoodie but still approachable, trading ideas with Jake, the junior coder, or asking Lisa about her latest project. The mistrust that had lingered after Daniel's firing had faded, replaced by a sense of community. Skyline wasn't just a workplace. It was a home for those who built it. Ethan's own growth was quieter but profound. His time as Daniel Reed had stripped away the armor of his CEO title, forcing him to face his flaws. He'd been fired for a bug he'd planted, a test that revealed the fear-driven culture he'd allowed to fester. That moment, humbling and raw, had rekindled his connection to his mother's struggles and his regret over firing Sarah Monroe years ago. Now, he led differently. He held monthly cubicle days, working alongside his team as Ethan, not Daniel. To stay grounded, he wrote a letter to Sarah, apologizing for his past mistake, and offered her a consultancy role, which she accepted with a cautious smile. "You've changed," she told him over coffee, and Ethan nodded, knowing it was true. Thomas Bennett, too, had evolved. The guilt of firing Daniel had been a turning point, pushing him to rethink his leadership. He now led with empathy, hosting listening lunches where employees shared their challenges, late-night coding marathons, family pressures, dreams of starting their own ventures. Thomas's warm brown eyes and steady presence made him a pillar of the team, and his bond with Ethan deepened into a partnership built on mutual respect. One afternoon, as they reviewed a new project proposal, Thomas grinned. "Never thought I'd fire my boss and live to tell the tale," he said. Ethan laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "Best decision you ever made." The ripple effects reached beyond Skyline. Ethan began sharing empathy first with other companies, speaking at tech conferences about the power of human-centered leadership. He described his firing as Daniel, not as a stunt, but as a lesson in vulnerability. "Leadership isn't about being untouchable," he told a packed auditorium. "It's about standing with your team, even when it hurts." The message resonated, inspiring startups and corporations alike to rethink their cultures. Ethan's story became a case study, a reminder that success could be measured in trust as much as profit. Lisa, once the team's sharpest critic, became an unexpected advocate. Her apology at the holiday party had marked a shift, as she now led a mentorship program for new hires, teaching them to code with confidence. Jake, inspired by Ethan's journey, pitched a new app feature that streamlined client feedback, earning him a promotion. The team's unity was palpable, evident in small moments. A birthday cake for a designer, a late-night brainstorming session fueled by pizza, a group chat filled with memes and encouragement. Skyline Solutions had become what Ethan had always dreamed, a place where people grew together. As spring bloomed, Ethan stood before his team in a town hall, the glass walls of the office reflecting their faces. "We've come far," he said, his voice steady, "but this is just the start. Let's keep building, not just software, but a legacy of care." The applause was warm, a chorus of belief. Afterward, Lisa approached him, her eyes bright. "You made us better," she said simply. Ethan smiled, his heart full. "You made me better too." This story of Ethan Caldwell and Skyline Solutions is a beacon of what leadership can be when guided by empathy. Ethan's journey from CEO to fired employee, from disguise to truth, teaches us that true strength lies in vulnerability, in seeing the humanity behind the numbers. His firing as Daniel wasn't a defeat, but a mirror, revealing the fears that divide us and the trust that unites us. Thomas's growth, Lisa's redemption, and the team's transformation remind us that change begins with listening, with believing in each other's potential. In a world obsessed with results, this story challenges us to prioritize people, to lead with heart, to lift others up, to build communities where everyone belongs. It's a call to action. Be the leader who sees, who cares, who dares to feel. Let Ethan's legacy inspire you to make a difference, one kind act at a time. As Ethan walked through Central Park, the city skyline a backdrop to his thoughts, he felt a quiet peace. Skyline Solutions was thriving, not just in profit, but in purpose. He'd been tested, broken, and rebuilt, and his team had risen with him. The oak trees overhead swayed, their new leaves a symbol of renewal. Ethan's journey wasn't over. He was already planning to expand empathy first globally, but for now, he savored the moment, knowing he'd found his true calling, not to rule, but to serve. This is the heart of what we share at Legacy Stories, tales of ordinary people creating extraordinary change through courage and compassion. If Ethan's journey moved you, join us for more. Subscribe to Legacy Stories on YouTube, where we bring you weekly stories of human triumph that inspire and uplift. Share this story with someone who needs to believe in the power of empathy. And drop a comment below to tell us where you're watching from. Together, we can build a community that celebrates humanity. Thank you for being part of our legacy, and we'll see you in the next story.